kind of like this. What is it? In order to exist like something, therefore exists all things within something simultaneously. And so like everything's all like inside of existence. That's kind of pantheism sort of.
Yeah, I mean, so there are other things in Plotinus that probably, in context, that probably can't be pantheism because of the other things said elsewhere. But there is this weird sense in which everything kind of runs together at the same time, which is what you're sort of channeling there, where it has this sort of pantheistic feel, which is where things like Christian panentheism comes from, where I'm not really, I'm not even sure what the full distinction is there, but you get these sort of pseudo views. I mean, look, living nature is special. And weirdly, what's special about it on Plotinus is it's the place where change happens. Because if you, again, you remember we have, again, the emanations of Plotinus's view is the one, nous, the intellectual principle, we have soul, and then we have this area where soul and nature kind of meet, and then at the far end we have matter. And it seems like nature is where matter hits soul, or these sort of intellectual forms that come, emanate from the intellectual principle, and that this is really where change, the only place that change can happen. So the conditions for change, it seems to require this combination of soul and the forms with soul, with matter in nature. And of course, the traditional Greek way of considering the relationship between soul and body is that soul is the form of the human body, and that soul is the form for each living thing. So on the Aristotelian account, plants have souls. They have a form of a plant soul. Animals, non-human animals have soul. They have a non-rational animal soul, and so forth. So ensouled matter and mattered soul, this is where change can take place. And without this, you can't have narrative, because you can't have narrative without change. So, yeah, we get to some weird places pretty quickly. All right, general reactions to Plotinus, any of the readings, questions, observations?
I guess if you go back to the ranking, so you said that the animal soul was irrational. Would they just view kind of, it's just still like a soul? Would they have kind of like, human soul is just inherently better? Or
Yeah, it's still a soul, but it has fewer capacities. So now I'm using the Aristotelian model. So on the Aristotelian model, animal souls are like human souls, but they lack the rational capacities that human has. But on Plato, interestingly enough, human and animal souls are more fluid, and this is from the Platonic tradition more than the Aristotelian tradition. So, for the sake of this view, the difference is a little more ambiguous. Although for a Christianized view, you can't let reincarnation in. You need that firmer categorical distinction between human and non-rational animal, which is why in part Darwinism is thought to be, in a certain sense, one of the reasons it's threatening to these religious views, is because it seems to undermine that distinction. So it's not just about, 6 days versus, X million years. It's about, are humans special in some way? And if we're really just good looking monkeys, maybe we're not that special after all.
I was really fascinated when I read that, the section that said that matter can't be destroyed, because I definitely thought that was a very modern era. Does it go back to anything like, does it go back to Plato, or is it a very Plotinus view of things?
One of the problems here is I'm not an ancient expert. I am not aware of this pre-Plotinus. It's probably somewhere, at least back in Porphyry, which is sort of the immediate predecessor to Plotinus, but I'm not aware of matter having these sorts of traits in Aristotle or Plato or the major players before that. Maybe the closest that this feels most similar to is actually Heraclitus. Because Heraclitus, has this view that everything is sort of in flux. Wait, so Heraclitus says everything's in flux. Maybe I misspoke. Maybe it's Parmenides that this is the most similar to. Because Parmenides says all of reality is one and unchanging. And all appearance to change is just illusory. So one explanation for why matter can't be destroyed would be because Parmenides is right, that all change is just sort of surfacey, but on the ultimate reality is unchanging. So there are some themes, if you go far enough back, that this, again, very few ideas just pop into existence out of nothing. Very few people are genuinely new original thinkers. Interesting observation, the great empiricist, Archbishop George Berkeley, denied the existence of substantial matter. And one of the reasons why he denies its reality is because you have to start postulating all these really powerful, weird things that we don't have direct access to. So Berkeley's view in modern subjective idealism is that the only things that exist are minds and sort of experiences, impressions within minds. But there's no substance to things like this outside of our experience and interaction with them. So this makes God as mind real and humans as minds real. But the nature that we interact with has kind of an unreal in the sense that it isn't real independent of us. So why doesn't everything just sort of blink out of existence? Well, as long as you believe in God, God is always watching all things. So that view has more reality to it than you might think on initial impression. But all that to say, the puzzle of what matter is and what substance is, it shows up in a lot of places. And the distinction between our experience of things and things in themselves is part of what drives philosophy in a very skeptical direction post-Immanuel Kant. So people like Berkeley and people as far back as Augustine Plotinus, they try to find ways to combine these things together, because if you don't have that, you end up with some very weird metaphysical puzzles. Is that a lot? Other thoughts, general thoughts, observations, Plotinus, or any of these other readings?
One thing I found interesting was going down to Basil's stuff. Just interesting how there's just similarities between Plotinus and Basil in terms of just mankind's inability to really fully comprehend the metaphysical and just the concept of the creator and nature. And I thought it was interesting because obviously Platonism is a big influence on Christian philosophy and theology, but you can find those same ideas that run back to Old Testament. So it's pre-Plato and completely pre-Hellenistic influence on Jewish culture. So it's really interesting how different holding time kind of come up with these similar ideas, like, they're still like limited.
Well, and it's not hard to see why the early medieval Christians liked Plato so much. I mean, there's a way of reading the Old Testament where, Plato feels like he's giving a sort of richer, more detached explanation that within which, the Old Testament, the narratives of the Old Testament make so much sense, even though they never kind of talk about the world in terms of, form and matter, in terms of material and immaterial. John?
When he talks about sensation as dreaming of the soul, is he just saying, like, don't put too much value in, like, information from the senses?
Are we talking about Basil here? Where was it?
What time is
Let me see if I can find that exactly. Oh, yeah. Such are the objections that may be raised against those who consider all beings as corporeal, who wish to judge of their existence only by impressions they receive therefrom, and who try to form the certitude of truth on the images of sensation. They resemble sleeping men who take as realities the visions they have in their dreams. Sensation is the dream of the soul, so long as the soul is in the body, she dreams. The real awakening of the soul consists in genuine separation from the body and not in rising along with the body. To rise with the body is to pass from one sleep to another kind, from one bed to another. Really to awake is to separate oneself completely from the body whose nature is contrary to that of the soul, consequently has a nature contrary to that of being. That is proved by the generation, flux, and decay of bodies, all processes contrary to the nature of being. Okay, so here's what's going on here. The sort of values expressed here again reflect the older Platonic ideas that what's really real is the soul, and what is somehow less real is physicality, materiality, bodily existence. So the real existence of the soul is its existence outside of its entanglement with material and body. This is a distraction, a dream, an illusion. So in a certain sense, it's not to be taken that seriously. And sort of embracing, the body as your reality is thought to be a mistake. You want to be sort of alienated from your body because the body is alienation from the soul on the Platonic way of thinking. Which is, again, if you Christianize this idea, what's more important, the current earthly existence or the future heavenly existence? On everything in Augustine and most Christians, the idea is, well, that existence is more important. Although there's a danger, I don't think the biblical religion wants to alienate us from our current existence to that degree. But at the same time, it does say things like, those of us who have wives should live as if we have not. Those of us who purchase things should live as if it's not ours to keep. So there's this weird, future-oriented view, but it tries to hold on to the now as well. And you can always meet people who have sort of imbalanced versions of religion, where either, the old saying is, well, they're so heavenly minded that they're of no earthly good, on the one hand, and then there's other people whose religion is just social ethics, and neither of those is anything like traditional Judeo-Christian biblical religion. So all that to say, there are, I know this is just a paragraph about the soul and the body being as a dream, but there's huge implications on how you let this shape one's values. Yes.
I want to go back to Basil, where they were discussing beginning, the word beginning,
Mm.
as used in Genesis.
you have a paragraph number?
Yeah, point number 6.
All right. Such being the different senses of the word beginning, see if we have not all the meanings here. You may know the epoch when the formation of this world began. Ascending into the past, you endeavor to discover the first day. You will thus find what was the first movement of time, then that the creation of the heavens and the earth were like the foundation and the groundwork. And afterwards, that an intelligent reason, note this is sounding a lot like Plotinus now, of intelligent principle of use, of an intelligent reason, as the word beginning indicates, presided in the order of visible things. You will finally discover that the world was not conceived by chance without reason, but for a useful end and for great advantage of all beings, since it is really the school where reasonable souls exercise themselves, the training ground where they learn to know God. Since by the sight of visible and sensible things, the mind is led as by a hand to the contemplation of invisible things. All right, so a couple of interesting things there. First, the discussion of the various senses of beginning, where, we're trying to, this would tie into our earlier discussion of time and the sense of the start of time. What was God doing before the creation? And, there really isn't a before, temporally speaking, just sort of logically speaking. There's a relationship. We also have the idea that reason helps shape the heavens, and that sounds very much like this noose giving off that which shapes form, soul, and ultimately nature. And we have a very interesting discussion of what is the value of earthly existence. And part of it is that this is the training ground. So it's not unreal, but in earthly existence, we see sort of physical pointers to invisible ultimate reality. So there's a bunch of interesting things sort of referenced here in Basil. And I'm pretty sure Basil is also, at the very least, he's affected by Neoplatonism. I don't remember if he himself is sort of a full-on Neoplatonist.
I found interesting for Basil is he had the similar criticisms of philosophers, astronomers, as Augustine, how it's like their own vanity, sort of how they were searching for, like, they were still kind of coming up short because they didn't have that same, didn't have the revelation or knowledge of God really. So that was interesting how, I can't, he was around the same time. Was he after Augustine or was he at the same?
Let me give you the right answer. So I'm going to ask Google so that I don't get this wrong. There we go. 329. So he's a contemporary. Oh, died 379. So he, so he overlaps with Augustine for a couple decades. So he's a near contemporary, probably in the church a little sooner than Augustine was. So they're interacting with the same kinds of thoughts and ideas in the culture. I also provided a scriptural passage. I provided Psalm 115 and a apocryphal passage from Ecclesiasticus, which has some similar themes of the relationship of wisdom and eternity, and the relationship of eternity to material creation. The height of the sky, the breadth of the earth, the depth of the abyss, who can explore? Wisdom was created before everything. Prudent understanding subsists from the most age. So look closely at those first 4 verses of Ecclesiasticus. it makes it sound like wisdom is separate from the divinity. Makes it sound like God is one and wisdom is the nous, the intellectual principle. And that sort of the other aspects of creation come forth in turn. So this distinction between God, wisdom, God, and sort of formal formation of the world is a recurring one. Oh, I remember what I forgot. In the Basil section we had just been reading, there is reference that the world has not occurred by chance. So I want to emphasize, this idea, is the world orderly and intentionally teleologically created, or whether it is fundamentally driven by random chance. That debate is a foundational metaphysical debate, and it's not a new one. It goes all the way, it goes all the way back to 4th century and almost certainly before that. At the end of the day, it seems to me that there's only sort of two coherent directions one's answer can go. Either you say it's all sort of planned and sort of teleologically guided at least, and that that's through something personal like God. Or if you want to go the other direction, if you want it to be chance, then what has to be sort of the ultimate reality has to be matter, because you need something that is eternal. If you don't have anything that's eternal, then your universe just pops into existence out of nothing. And then that is in my opinion, that is the least coherent of the options of what your ultimate account of metaphysics can be. So if you want to have sort of a more materialist account, what you need is sort of an oscillating universe image of the Big Bang, where material reality is all that's real, and it's driven by sort of chance rather than guided, and that there's actually not just one Big Bang, but an infinite series of Big Bangs, because you need material to be eternal. Because otherwise you should ask, well, where does material come from and why does it come from? And on the older Big Bang version, it just sounds like the universe pops into reality. Well, look, unless you're going to combine that with Genesis chapter 1, I don't see how that's coherent. Universes don't just pop into reality. It's much better to say the universe is always been. But that's much more Eastern.
So you said that there's the one campus, like everything's all planned out. Well, kind of like deists believe, like, there was a creator that made everything kind of just a hands-off approach. So like we have still fall in that same camp.
Well, sure. I mean, I don't think the deist is committed to chance to that degree. I mean, all the deist is committed to is non-interference. So, I mean, look, any kind of God worth its salt can start the top of the universe spinning and know where it's going to end up in 10 million years, even if it doesn't constantly intervene. So I don't think the deist has to, I think the deist God is still smart enough to get the universe where it wants to, as long as it cares enough to. Now, the deist God might be indifferent. But the deist God isn't less intelligent, I don't think. So I don't think deism leads to that view. I think materialism does.
So the question is about like time, eternity, things like that. If you're like say you're a Neoplatonist and you believe that like change is time and like it's within like the nature, like because the ultimate goal is to go further to the true existence, does that mean in any way abandoning time?
Yeah. I mean, I've never seen that explicitly stated anywhere, that I remember at least. But there is, this is closely connected to kind of a Stoic view of the world, where we don't want to be affected by things. We want to be detached. So it does sound like it does lead to sort of a detachment. I've not seen the Neoplatonists say, don't be in time. I mean, obviously that's not really an option, but things do start to go that way. But here's where I think the nature of narrative and Augustinian narrative kind of resists that thread from Plato. I mean, this is very much a story of change, flux, and fulfillment. So I think layering narrative over these older, cold Platonian, Neoplatonic accounts of metaphysics, even if you are sympathetic to those sorts of metaphysics, the experience of the self as a growing being in flux, in time, I think it pushes you away from some of the more absurd aspects of the Platonian Neoplatonism metaphysics. Which is why one of the big rivals to the Christian worldview at this time are these sort of Gnostic, pseudo-Christian views, like the Manichaeans, like other versions of Gnosticism that you see engaged in some of the Pauline letters. I like this metaphor at the end of the Plotinus I gave you. Matter as mother, nurse, residence, and other nature. The idea of matter as mother. Matter seems to be like the least nurturing thing in the universe to me. To personify it as mother and nurse, that's a very counterintuitive metaphor. When things enter into the matter that plays the part of mother to them, they neither hurt it nor give it pleasure. Their blows are not felt by matter. They direct their blows only against each other, because the powers act upon their opposites and not on their substrates, unless indeed we consider the substrates as united to the things they contain. Heat makes cold disappear, as whiteness affects blackness. Or if they mingle, they produce a new quality by their mixture. All right, so I guess the idea here is that for things to have life, form must mix with matter, and here matter is the mother. That's really counterintuitive to me. I would have thought that the form would be mother, but apparently Plotinus knows better than me at this point. He does make a very interesting point, which ties into our earlier discussion of matter doesn't get destroyed. Matter doesn't get destroyed, it's forms that get destroyed. So heat doesn't destroy the matter in cold. What it destroys is the form of coldness in the matter, and it changes that. And what you're left with is still matter, it's just now warm matter rather than cold matter. All right, well, that's stuff that I thought was really important in there. But there's plenty more we can discuss in Basil or in Psalm. Suppose I could give 10 minutes to help you with your papers.
I just thought of something I remember. So how Basil was talking about how they can just through just like I guess the physical through just like their senses, I guess. And the quote I thought of a couple classes ago from Gregory, which is the only animals who see truth only through their senses. He's a Basil's little brother.
Oh, that's cool. That's a very theologically influential family. Were they from a rich family? Or were they just from a smart family? Often the two coincide because, of course, rich families can afford the best education. So if you are smart but poor, you survive, but you don't go around writing books.
Yeah, they were scraps.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Oh, and his dad is the other Basil.
Oh.
Saul. What I probably would, or what I thought was the most connected to, well, the highest heavens belong to the Lord, the earth is given to mankind. And I think that definitely kind of talks, that almost goes to maybe heaven of heavens and the matter, but like the matter, the form given to the matter as the earth.
Right, and you can start having the conversation, where are the highest of heavens? Is this a place in physical space-time, or does this refer to the immaterial realm of the forms? Is it just sort of the realm of nous? That's a good Platonian way of thinking about that. Although, to be blunt, I very much doubt that that's the way the ancient Hebrews thought about this. So I don't know if that makes it less likely to be true, but I do like to be self-aware when I'm departing from what the then contemporaries would have understood it to have meant.
Because he was talking about like interpreting what Moses was writing. That was also in the sciences. It was just, just the section. Plato's figurative language might leave errors about his real opinions. So it was I was kind of fascinated because I wonder if like Augustine, in writing about form and matter, like kind of was reminded by this about like misinterpreting things. Because it seems interesting that this discussion correlates with misinterpretation, just as it did as well.
No, that's good. I usually the Psalms the scripture passages I include are usually because they're quoted by Augustine in this section. So this might have been part of what he had in mind. And that would fit in well with the idea that nothing Moses thinks about the scriptures is false, but it might be incomplete. So Augustine would understand this kind of thinking as sort of fleshing out some of the more philosophical nuances that Moses might not have thought of, or symbolic, metaphorical nuances that Moses might not have had in mind.
Maybe thought of it as like Moses had it just because it talks about Moses' closeness to God, like how God revealed certain things to him. But they would view it as God hadn't fully revealed everything to him yet, like kind of lots of there's knowledge of like the Messiah, stuff like that, but not really giving the full bunch of.
Yeah. Look, clearly Moses isn't omniscient. So there are going to be true things that Moses doesn't know. And most theologians believe in some variation of progressive revelation. Moses probably understands things Abraham doesn't understand. The apostles probably understand things that Moses didn't understand. A lot of it boils down to how you're comfortable parsing that out. Because you want the religion to be one continuous religion, but you also want room for development within it. Interestingly, Muslims kind of want the same thing. They just sort of pull on different threads in these stories to connect them to Muhammad's visions in the Quran, going all the way back to Genesis, where they favor the line of Ishmael over the line of Isaac. So they think of Abraham as kind of the first monotheist. All right, so next time, Book 13. We are in the stretch. Or if I were to channel my end of the world prophetic sign, the end is nigh. Judgment is coming. The final exam judgment. What's that? Sandwiches are coming? That sounds good. So, hey, if you've got, missing work, try to get that to me by the last day of class. If, you need help or are lost in some way, let me know and we'll try to work something out. Be good. Take care.